What happens when America's most beloved morning show host goes head-to-head with royalty's most controversial figure? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Lara Spencer for what was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance, only to have it explode into the most dramatic television confrontation we've seen all year. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of Good Morning America was supposed to feature a light-hearted conversation about Meghan's latest charitable initiatives, but what viewers witnessed instead was a masterclass in how a celebrity interview can spiral completely out of control. From the moment Meghan walked onto the set, tension was palpable in the studio. And by the end of their exchange, cameras were still rolling, as the Duchess of Sussex stormed off set in what can only be described as an epic meltdown. The trouble began almost immediately when Lara Spencer, known for her direct questioning style and unwillingness to let celebrities off the hook, opened with what seemed like an innocent enough question about Meghan's recent public appearances. "Meghan, you've been making quite a few headlines lately, and I have to ask. There seems to be some inconsistency between what you say publicly about wanting privacy and the number of high-profile events you're attending. Can you help our viewers understand that?" The question clearly caught Meghan off guard, and her response was immediate and defensive. "Lara, I think that's a completely unfair characterization. My husband and I have always been clear about our boundaries, and attending charity events that support causes we care about isn't inconsistent with wanting our private family life respected." But Spencer wasn't backing down. With her characteristic smile that barely concealed her determination to get real answers, she pressed forward. "I understand that, but last week alone you were photographed at 3 different galas. You did 2 podcast interviews, and you had a very public lunch with several Hollywood executives. That doesn't really sound like someone seeking privacy, does it?" The studio audience, which had been warmly applauding just minutes earlier, fell into an uncomfortable silence as Meghan's demeanor visibly shifted. Her carefully composed public persona began to crack as she leaned forward in her chair, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "I think what you're doing right now is exactly the kind of media manipulation that drove us to step back from royal duties in the first place. You're twisting our words and creating narratives that simply aren't true." Spencer, however, was just getting started. Years of interviewing evasive celebrities had honed her instincts, and she could sense when someone was deflecting rather than answering directly. "Meghan, I'm not trying to manipulate anything. I'm simply asking about what appears to be a contradiction. You've spoken extensively about the toll that media attention took on your mental health, yet you continue to seek out media opportunities. Our viewers are intelligent people. They can see the difference between necessary public appearances and actively courting publicity." What happened next shocked everyone in the studio. Meghan's composure completely shattered as she practically shouted her response. "How dare you question my mental health struggles? You have no idea what it's like to have every single move you make scrutinized and twisted by people like you, who are more interested in creating drama than reporting the truth." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Spencer's expression hardened. She had been in the television business long enough to know when someone was trying to make her the villain to avoid answering legitimate questions. "Meghan, I never questioned your mental health struggles. What I questioned was the apparent contradiction between saying you want privacy while simultaneously maintaining a very public profile. Those are 2 completely different things." But Meghan was in full attack mode now, her voice rising with each word. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You invite me on your show under the pretense of discussing my charity work, and then you ambush me with tabloid-style accusations designed to make me look like a hypocrite. This is the worst kind of journalism, and frankly, I expected better from someone in your position." The insult clearly struck a nerve with Spencer, who had built her reputation on fair but tough interviewing over decades in the business. Her voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the surface as she responded. "Meghan, I've been doing this job for over 20 years, and I've never ambushed anyone. These are questions that many people are asking, and as a public figure who has chosen to remain in the spotlight, you should be prepared to address them honestly rather than attacking the person asking them." That response seemed to push Meghan over the edge completely. Standing up abruptly from her chair, she pointed an accusatory finger at Spencer. You know what, Lara? This is exactly the kind of hostile environment that made living in the UK impossible for my family. You're not interested in having a real conversation. You just want to tear me down for your ratings. Spencer remained seated, her professional demeanor intact even as the situation spiraled out of control around her. Meghan, asking follow-up questions about apparent inconsistencies in your public statements isn't hostile. It's journalism. If you can't handle basic scrutiny of your public positions, maybe you should reconsider putting yourself in the public eye. The response was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Meghan's face flushed red with anger as she practically screamed her reply. Basic scrutiny? You call this ambush basic scrutiny? This is character assassination disguised as journalism, and I refuse to sit here and be attacked by someone who clearly has an agenda against me. By now, the studio audience was completely silent, watching in stunned disbelief as one of the most famous women in the world had a very public breakdown on live television. Production assistants could be seen in the background, unsure whether to intervene or let the cameras keep rolling on what was rapidly becoming television history. Spencer, to her credit, maintained her composure throughout the entire exchange. Meghan, the only agenda I have is getting honest answers to honest questions. You came on this show to promote your work, and part of that means being willing to address the questions that people naturally have about the choices you've made. But Meghan was beyond reason at this point. Her voice cracked with emotion as she launched into what would be her final verbal assault. Honest questions? You call trying to paint me as some kind of publicity-seeking hypocrite honest? This is exactly the kind of media harassment that forced us to leave everything we knew behind, and I can see that nothing has changed. You people are still the same vindictive, small-minded bullies you always were. The personal attack on Spencer and the broader media finally crossed a line that the veteran host couldn't ignore. Standing up from her own chair, Spencer's voice remained controlled, but carried unmistakable authority. Meghan, I understand you're upset, but calling me and my colleagues bullies because we ask questions you don't like is completely inappropriate. We invited you here in good faith to discuss your work, and you've turned it into a personal attack on our integrity. What happened next will likely be replayed on social media for months to come. Meghan, apparently realizing that she had gone too far but unwilling to back down, made one final dramatic gesture. Ripping off her microphone and throwing it onto the coffee table between them, she declared in a voice that the entire studio could hear, I don't have to sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly has no understanding of what real journalism looks like. Spencer's response was swift and devastating in its simplicity. Real journalism is asking the questions that need to be asked, regardless of whether the subject wants to answer them. I'm sorry you can't handle that. But Meghan was already walking away, her heels clicking loudly on the studio floor as she headed for the exit. Over her shoulder, she delivered her parting shot. This interview is over, and your viewers will see exactly what kind of person you really are when they watch this back. As the studio doors slammed shut behind the departing Duchess, Spencer turned back to the camera with the kind of professional grace that comes from decades of live television experience. The silence in the studio was deafening, broken only by the quiet hum of the cameras that had captured every explosive moment of what will undoubtedly go down as one of the most dramatic celebrity walkouts in morning television history. The confrontation revealed something that many had suspected but few had seen so clearly, that beneath Meghan's polished public persona lies someone who cannot handle even the most basic questioning about her choices and actions, and who will lash out viciously at anyone who dares to hold her accountable for the contradictions in her public statements.